There are over 20 members of the European Parliament here from many countries and many political groups. The Deputy Director General of the European Commission is meant to be presenting this report. I have been told he is on his way. We could ask another member from the Commission to present in his stead, but given the seriousness with which MEPs are showing on this matter because they are present, I think we should wait for the Deputy Director General in order to be here for the MEPs to hear from him. Is there a problem with why he is not here yet? Because I know we're running 5 minutes ahead of time. Shall we wait 5 more minutes? We were told 10 minutes ago that he would be here within 2 minutes. Is there a problem? We'll wait another 5 minutes. On the agenda because they would like to hear from the most senior Commission official invited to present. So they would like to switch the agenda items if possible. But they're not yet here.
Because it's also the Commission. It's 5 o'clock.
So we will continue to wait. Of weapons, so-called firearms directive. We have just been joined by the Commission Deputy Director General, Mr. Del Sal. Welcome. We do always ask, if possible, people to arrive a bit on time because I do note that a number of members of the committee are here. Just by way of background, there has been European legislation on firearms since 1991, and which was last reviewed in 2008 by this committee. My own predecessor was one of the shadow rapporteurs on it. The review included an implementing regulation on how to ensure that firearms are properly deactivated where deactivation is required. And it is deeply, deeply unfortunate that that implementing regulation has taken so long to agree, but I understand it was agreed just a couple of weeks ago. At the same time, the Commission came out with this proposal, and as soon as I heard about it, I asked for the Commission to come to the Internal Markets Committee to present it at the earliest possible moment. We know that the proposal includes elements that will improve the sharing of registers across borders between Member States, enhance marking and enable tracking of deactivated arms, for example. I am also aware that concerns have been raised by many members of the public on parts of the detailed drafting. And I am aware that there is a great deal of interest on the drafting issues, and just because this is for the public record, I wanted to remind members of the public that it is the role of this committee and committees of the Parliament to propose amendments to drafting, and that is what we do when we always look at legislation. So any proposal from the Commission is not finalised until amendments have been submitted and voted on. And it is right at this time that we check any loopholes in the law and try and improve communications between authorities. But at the same time, any new legislation must be coupled with greater enforcement against illegal arms, crime and terrorism. And I understand that just last week the Commission came up with another proposal which is looking at illicit weapons. So I am now going to hand over to Mr Del Sau to present the proposal, and then I know that a number of members are here, and I will start to take a speakers list if members would like to speak. And we'll take coordinators first. Mr Del Sau.
Madam Chair, first of all, I apologize for being late. It was, I can tell you, for a good, very good reason, but I'm really sorry for you, and I hope it will never happen again, because that's not acceptable. I fully understand for you. I don't need to repeat, to explain the context. You know the context, you know it's a very sensitive one, so I don't need to dwell too much on this issue, because you understand the context of what we have done and why we have done it. Let me be clear. With our proposal, we don't want to solve all the issues linked to the questions of weapons. We are not focusing in this text on the illegal traffic of arms. And as you may know, the European Security Agenda, which has been adopted by the Commission on the 2nd of December, constitutes, or at least try to constitute, a response to the larger problem of illegal firearms. So that's not the purpose of today's discussion, even if it's a very important issue, of course. The measures that we are proposing are based on 3 studies which have been realized by consultants. And we have produced a report, a Commission report, which has been communicated to the European Parliament and to the Council. And this report presents an evaluation of the implementation of the Firearms Directive. And I also need to personally thank the Permanent International Commission for the proof of small arms, which has provided to us their expertise and their technical knowledge. Now, what are the 5 main modifications that we propose to introduce to the directive? First modification, it concerns the categories of firearms. To be very clear, and contrary to what I've seen somewhere on the internet or in some reactions, we do not aim at banning all semi-automatics for use by civilians. With regard to semi-automatic firearms, we only propose to prohibit 2 types of arms which have been identified as potentially dangerous. First of all, automatic firearms which have been converted into semi-automatic, and which, of course, could be reconverted in automatic firearms. We also want to look at semi-automatic firearms for civilian use, which resemble weapons with automatic mechanism. For example, a semi-automatic Kalashnikov. But let's be clear, under the existing directive, there are 6 other types of semi-automatic firearms which are not modified by our proposal and can be acquired by private persons subject to national authorization. Let's be very clear on this. Second aspect, which I believe is important also on our proposal, that alarm and signal weapons, we propose that those alarms weapons are covered by the directive, but subject to a simple declaration. And moreover, we also propose that the Commission shall adopt technical specifications to ensure that these arms cannot be transformed into firearms. So that's the first set of modifications concerning the categories of firearms. Second element of our proposals concerns the deactivated firearms. In the context of the existing directive, deactivated firearms are not considered as firearms anymore, but as simple pieces of metal, which means that actually any private person can purchase those pieces of metal, so-called pieces of metal, without declaration, and they can circulate everywhere in Europe. The recent terrorist attacks have confirmed that certain deactivated firearms are actually reactivated and used by the terrorists. So the Commission regulation on deactivation, which has been adopted on the 18th of November, has introduced stricter criteria which will considerably limit the risk of reactivation. But this risk cannot be totally excluded. And that's why that in the proposal that we submit, we propose to prohibit the acquisition of the most dangerous firearms even after deactivation. This concerns the so-called A category. To be very clear, an automatic Kalashnikov which has been deactivated would be subject to the directive now. That's at least our proposal at this stage. With respect to the other categories of firearms, those not covered by the category A, deactivated firearms could be acquired by private persons, but we propose that these arms should be subject to a simple declaration. We don't want to create unnecessary administrative burden, but we want to allow the police to find the origin of such arm if it's used in a criminal action. Third aspect of the proposal, the use of Internet. Internet is now largely used by private persons to buy and sell all categories of products and services, including firearms. And we know that selling firearms on the Internet is much more difficult to control and will be even more difficult to control in the future. But we also know that this channel can be easily used by terrorists to acquire firearms that they are not authorized to buy, or to acquire fully illegal firearms, notably military arms. I mean, my colleague actually made the experience, and it took him 5 minutes to find, and not buy, but he could have bought it, and buy on Internet a simple kit to transform a semi-automatic firearm into a fully automatic one, or to buy components for Kalashnikov. We consider that the risk for citizens is too important. So basically what we propose is to prohibit the acquisition of firearms on Internet for private persons. It does not mean that private persons will not have the possibility to import arms from another member state, but this should be done via authorized dealers and brokers. Fourth element, brokers and collectors. For the time being, brokers and collectors are not subject to the existing directive, contrary to dealers. Again, we don't want to create unnecessary difficulties for brokers and collectors, but we consider that they should be subject to the directive. It does not mean that they will be prevented from buying firearms, but they will have to request authorization under the same condition as any other private person. Finally, exchange of information between member states. The recent terrorist attacks have demonstrated the importance of exchange of information between member states concerning the authorizations granted to private persons and the main characteristics of each firearms. For the moment, this information is only available at national level. We want to favour the exchange of information between member states because we consider it's extremely important. I would stop at this stage to give you an opportunity to react, and again I'm sorry for being late and not having been ready to answer your question in time. Thank you.
I'm going to take a first round of questions from the coordinators first, and then come back to everybody who's asking. Can we ask questions, and then I'm going to ask the Commission to come back and answer those questions. Okay? Evelyn Gebhardt.
Ja, danke schön, dass Sie uns hier noch einmal erläutern, was die Europäische Kommission vorschlägt. Und das ist auch ganz wichtig, weil ganz offensichtlich gibt es im Netz zurzeit eine richtige Kampagne. Und da ist es ganz gut, wenn da mal ein bisschen Ruhe hineingebracht wird, weil nicht alles, was da zu lesen, zu hören, in vielen E-Mails, die wir inzwischen erhalten, stimmt überein mit dem, was die Europäische Kommission vorschlägt. Das ist das eine. Zum anderen, die Europäische Kommission schlägt vor, das heißt noch lange nicht, dass es Gesetz ist, sondern es muss erst mal sowohl vom Parlament wie auch vom Ministerrat entschieden werden. Und die Vorschläge, die die Kommission gerade erläutert hat, sind meiner Meinung nach durchaus in die richtige Richtung. Ich habe allerdings noch Informationsnotwendigkeiten. Und ich möchte ganz gerne wissen, bei Ihrem zweiten Punkt, Alarm- und Signalwaffen sollen abgedeckt werden mittels einer einfachen Erklärung. Ich habe jetzt nicht ganz verstanden, was mit dieser Erklärung gemeint ist. Wer muss welche Erklärung, welche Art von Erklärung, wozu soll sie dienen? Was steht dahinter? Das habe ich jetzt nicht ganz verstanden. Das würde ich ganz gerne wissen. Dann auch noch einmal eine Klarstellung in der Frage Online-Kauf. Sie sagten zu Beginn, es geht nicht um illegalen Waffenhandel, und dann kommen Sie doch in diesem vierten Punkt, den Sie angesprochen, auf den illegalen Waffenhandel. Es geht nicht genau darum, das ist mir auch klar, aber wohl um die Definition, wer legal im Internet Waffen verkaufen darf. Jetzt habe ich nicht ganz verstanden, zunächst einmal hatte ich so in den ersten Sätzen, die Sie gesagt haben, hatte ich es so verstanden, ja, also nur Händler, keinerlei Privatpersonen dürfen, aber in dem letzten Nebensatz habe ich verstanden, dass Sammler dennoch auch dazu gehören könnten. Unter welcher Prämisse würden dann Sammler plötzlich nicht mehr Privatpersonen, sondern Händler sein? Also da denke ich, das ist eine Frage, die noch ein bisschen zu klären ist. Und letzter Punkt, den Sie angesprochen haben, der Austausch von Informationen zwischen den Mitgliedstaaten. Das war ja schon eine heftige Diskussion, die wir 2008 hatten, als wir die letzte Revision gemacht haben, dass die Mitgliedstaaten sehr unwillig waren, sich in diese Richtung zu bewegen. Glauben Sie, dass jetzt in der aktuellen Situation ein bisschen mehr Verständnis von den Mitgliedstaaten da ist? Und ich denke, dass es notwendig ist, dass Informationen über die Grenzen hinweg über welche Waffen sind zugelassen, wie viele Waffen, welcher Art sind sie, wer darf sie kaufen oder verkaufen, weil die Regeln, die wir in den Mitgliedstaaten durchaus auch unterschiedlich sind, auch wenn wir ein gemeinsames Recht haben. Also da denke ich, das ist auch ein ganz wichtiger Punkt. Haben Sie da schon mit den Mitgliedstaaten darüber geredet und werden Sie auch bereit sein, diesen Schritt auch dieses Mal zu machen, den ich ja durchaus für sehr wichtig halte?
Okay. Just to clarify, I'm going to call each of the coordinators first. I'm aware that Andreas isn't here. I don't know if the EPP have nominated a lead, but if not, we will go through. So Dan Dalton next for the ECR.
Thank you, Vicky. As everyone said before, this is a very difficult topic. You know, we absolutely need strong firearms legislation across Europe. We have pan-European supply chains, and it is vitally important that we get more traceability and exchange across member states. But it needs to be sensible, achievable and enforceable, and not create a whole load more illegal firearms, because our problem is illegal firearms. We can't trace them, and they are the ones that are most often used in crime and terrorist attacks. So, I have two sort of general questions for the Commission. First of all, with regards to the ban on deactivated weapons. Now, there are hundreds of thousands of these in circulation. No records exist. If you ban them overnight, aren't you just going to drive these all underground and create a whole load more illegal firearms, because people will have to get rid of them? So I have real concerns about what you're doing here. Deactivated weapons, by definition, can't be used. I mean, once you reactivate them, then they become illegal, and it's a significant hassle to reactivate them. And I suspect people that are looking to get these firearms are, going to look probably for other means. So, do you have any figures, specific figures, on the number of crimes that have been used, that have been carried out using deactivated weapons? Also, these weapons are used by many other industries, all of which are law-abiding. Museums, for example, what will be the situation for museums that put these deactivated weapons on show? TV, film industry, training in the security industry, historical reenactment, all of these are law-abiding industries. And what is going to be the effect on them? Now, in terms of ban on internet sales, first of all, how will you enforce this? I mean, as we all know with the internet, we're studying the digital single market at the moment, there's a lot that goes on the internet that we can't enforce. So one, is a ban actually going to have any effect? But two, isn't it better to have legal outlets so that people can legally buy firearms if they have the right licences? In the UK, we have significant checks. You can buy firearms online, but only with a firearms licence that the seller or the local authority has to check themselves. Now, isn't that a better approach rather than just going for a blanket ban that it would be difficult to enforce? So, from our point of view, yes, let's toughen up the existing registrations for legal owners. Let's get to the crux of the problem, but let's not make it worse. In the UK, we have a very, very difficult experience of this, and I think we now have very good proportionate rules, and I have concerns that the approach that is being taken here by the Commission, it could undermine the sort of steps that we have already taken. Thank you.
Dieter Schauenberger.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to thank the Commission for its presentation. I agree that this is an area where the EU should act, so yes, I'm convinced that the trade and distribution of weapons, especially decommissioned weapons, must be subject to greater control and better evidence. In fact, it can be one of the few areas where we have a well-functioning internal market, unfortunately. Anyone can go online and buy a deactivated weapon or its part from any member state and use them to reassemble a functioning weapon, as you have also mentioned. In some cases, it only takes basic mechanical knowledge to do it. When combined with black market trade in weapons left over from the Balkan conflicts, this has been as much a problem before the Paris attacks as it is nowadays. So there is a need to ensure that current laws are fully enforced as intended and that legal gaps are filled. We have to insist that the minimum requirements for the activation of firearms are set and most of all implemented. And this is why I welcome the implemented regulation presented and adopted by the Commission. But we must take extreme care what is in the scope of this directive and what should be our primary goal. In our desire to stop illegal and unethical trading of weapons, we must not unintentionally punish our citizens that have followed the law and that legally own and use weapons for hunting, sport or legal self-defense. We must not undermine well-functioning legislation which is in force in some of the member states. The law-abiding citizens have to see their rights reassured. Otherwise, the overall proposal would not meet its original expectations. I believe that we have to be very exact in our wording in the directive in order to avoid any misinterpretation. So the current proposed text from the Commission will have to be tightened up. As speakers before me already mentioned, I also received hundreds of emails from the Czech citizens, and I will make sure that I will take into account the voices and concerns of the Czech citizens as how to best protect collective security, but while also respecting the liberties of our individual citizens. And in this context, I would like to ask the Commission to be, please, clear and specific on the potential ban of semi-automatic weapons. You have touched upon this issue, but for instance, the weapons in the category of sport and hunting Are they going to be touched by your proposal? We, and I think all citizens, would like to know more on this issue, and then I think we will be able to discuss it further once we have more clarification from the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Pascal Durand.
Merci Madame la Présidente. J'ai parfois le sentiment qu'on écoute les citoyens sur certains sujets et qu'on les écoute beaucoup moins sur d'autres sujets qui sont pourtant bien plus pacifiques. Et je le regrette. Je dois dire que le fait de lier la possession, la libre ou presque vente des armes à la sécurité.
The fact that you're linking the possession of weapons or the almost free sale of weapons to security is a myth. All you have to do is to look at the United States of America. It's extremely easy to buy weapons, and yet 32,000 people die because of firearms. 32,000. In France, I think it's 365 deaths due to firearms, and France isn't the best pupil, but the figures are much better than in the United States. I don't think that we can talk about such a subject by looking at it from the point of view of freedom and the usual trade rules or legislation rules that apply to other areas. I understand that there are hunters, and in Demeron there was a jogger that was killed this weekend because he was just jogging through the forest. He was killed by a hunter accidentally. Of course, that's very unfortunate. I do understand that there are hunters and people who like using weapons for sports, but that doesn't mean that we cannot regulate the market and weapons trade. All you need to know is to have used one once. I did my military service, and I used semi-automatic weapons. And it's true that it's not easy, of course, but if a semi-automatic weapon is turned to an automatic weapon, the consequences can be grave. Now, I'd like to pay tribute to the work that has been done by the Commission. I think that this makes good progress. We were planning this. The Commission said it was going to revise the 2008 text. Unfortunately, the current context is very dramatic. We don't need to go into detail, but we mustn't mix up different things. There are some member states in the EU that have two categories of weapons: banned weapons and weapons that are subject to authorization. This is pretty straightforward. We talk a lot about better regulation and trying to come up with more user-friendly legislation, but maybe this is an opportunity to simplify. I think having 7 or 8 categories of weapons makes it very difficult for the layman to understand what this is all about. So why doesn't the European Commission envisage a two-tier system, to have 2 categories, banned weapons and one subject to authorization? I was told that we should listen to citizens that are spamming us. I would like to know what NGOs the European Commission contacted and consulted. I'm very familiar with the arms lobby, so I'm wondering whether other associations were consulted. So these are 2 very specific questions I'd like the European Commission to answer. Thank you. Mr. Ivaskovic, thank you, from the EFDD.
Dziękuję ślicznie, Pani Przewodnicząca. Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if I understand correctly the proposed text, especially on banning the possession of automatic firearms, is especially semi-automatic and semi-automatic similar to automatic, and semi-automatic firearms that can be converted to automatic firearms. This can mean that citizens may be prevented from possessing semi-automatic firearms. And I am wondering whether maybe we would like to confiscate firearms of thousands of European citizens. This may also mean losses to citizens. We cannot justify everything by reference to security. That's one dimension of the problem. And the other dimension, I am wondering if the justification to change the directive by reference to terrorist attacks is not a mistake, or even more than a mistake, because the legislation that we want to change is going to affect law-abiding citizens and not terrorists. So it is the law-abiding citizens that will see their access to firearms limited.
Andreas, do you want to come in?
Habe aber wegen der verspäteten Ankunft des Vertreters der Kommission musste ich unbedingt nochmal zurück ins Büro. Ich glaube, dass wir schon deutlich machen müssen, dass wir natürlich ein großes Interesse auch in diesem Haus daran haben, dass Waffen nur rechtmäßig besessen werden können, dass die dafür notwendigen Regeln logisch und vor allen Dingen auch so ausgestaltet sein müssen, dass wir tatsächlich sicherstellen können, dass sich Vorfälle wie unerfreulicherweise auch in meiner Heimatregion nicht wiederholen können. Ich glaube, dass deswegen der wesentliche Punkt für die vielen Jägerinnen und Jäger und auch für die Sportschützen weniger in der Tatsache lag, dass die Europäische Kommission zur Logik dieser Waffenbestimmungen beitragen wollte, sondern vielleicht ein Stück weit in der Atmosphäre der Verkündigung und der Pressedarstellung, warum diese Änderung notwendig geworden ist. Nach meinem Kenntnisstand war sie schon lange geplant. Sie hatte mit den terroristischen Anschlägen nichts zu tun. Ich glaube, dass auch hier im Europäischen Parlament nur wenige glauben, dass die Waffen, um die es hier geht, tatsächlich in Kategorien fallen, die in solchen Anschlägen traurigerweise genutzt wurden. Deswegen wäre es, glaube ich, wichtig, dass die Europäische Kommission heute mal ganz klarstellt, was mit dem Vorschlag bezweckt wird, was, wie schon gefragt wurde, normal tätige Jäger oder Sportschützen, die ihre Waffen rechtmäßig erworben und auch sicher verschlossen halten, mit diesem Vorschlag am Schluss anzufangen haben. Ich glaube, wenn man hier eine klare Darstellung bringen könnte, würde das viele Emotionen beruhigen, die es in der Tat in allen Bereichen Europas bei den Jägern und bei den Sportschützen gibt und die auch an uns persönlich herangetragen worden sind. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you. Now I'm going to read out my list. This is Mr. Tarabella, Mrs. Bossud, Ulskog, Shenalova, Obermeyer, Aloha-Aho, Schwenfield, Dante, Karas, Metzola, and myself. So those, and Catherine Styler, sorry. And you're first. So we have quite a lot of speakers. This means that the next item on the agenda may be a bit delayed, so for which I apologise. But I think it's worth taking these. But could they try and be quite brief questions or points? Mr. Tarabella.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Merci à Monsieur Delceau pour sa présentation, car effectivement.
I think that our objective today should be trying to crack down on the illegal weapons and semi-automatic weapons, and making sure that that semi-automatic weapons aren't easily converted into automatic weapons. Of course, we have to look at this, but we're not here to talk about this afternoon. We are going to get something that the Civil Liberties Committee will look at, and that's on the illegal trade. But look at some countries, there are more stringent rules, but that doesn't stop Kalashnikov weapons being sold in cafes for almost peanuts. There are very interesting measures, such as harmonizing rules on the issue of marking, so that people can't file the markings off, the issue of traceability, having common procedures, and making sure that deactivated weapons are registered. So harmonization is very interesting. My first question to the Commission is: you want to harmonize, and you have a proposal for a directive, but why not a proposal for regulation? Because my experience shows me that with a Council of 28, if you want to harmonise, it always says Member States may rather than Member States shall, so the harmonisation will only be partial. So why not a regulation instead of a directive? And something that's been said several times already, there's the whole issue of sports shooting and hunting. I don't think these sectors should be covered. I don't think that we should go too far. There are some countries that go further, but we don't want hunters and sport shooters to be the victims of collateral damage, if you like, because we want more security for citizens. Thank you.
Annelien van Boyset.
Dank u, Vicky. Bedankt aan de commissie om ons al een eerste toelichting te geven over het voorstel, want inderdaad dat iedereen benaderd wordt en heel veel e-mails over het voorstel krijgen.
The proposal to us, and we've been contacted, and it's true that citizens don't really know what's going on. Trade has to be regulated properly. Those who hold hunting rifles should not be affected. Hence my question, is the Commission not worried that there's a little nuance missing here, and that sports clubs, for example, using this kind of weapon will see their activities truncated?
Does the European Commission understand the concerns of those who use weapons lawfully and legitimately? Secondly, in the European Commission text, there are references to regular checks, so with additional, for example, certification needed in the case of hunters. You said that we're not talking about illegal weapons, but what connection does there exist between the two in the eyes of the European Commission? I'm referring to the fact that terrorists do get their hands on illegal weapons, for example, in the Western Balkans. And now, on online purchases of weapons and online sales, when you have illegal weapons being sold on the internet, or rather, when illegal weapons are made available on the internet, some national authorities believe that this is tantamount to online sales. So what is your view on the matter? This text does look at online sales, proper sales, but I'm thinking about legal weapons that are being advertised on the basis of certain features. So can there really be legal sales of weapons, for example, for hunting purposes? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here, and as many others already have said, of course, all of us understand that we must have proposals, we must have legislation that can stop illegal trade and illegal dealing with weapons. But at the same time, and that is what it's all about now, it's important to draw the line so that we don't end up in making it impossible for non-criminal hunters and sport shooters, and they are many, to use semi-automatic weapons to for their legal activities. So once again, can you repeat from the Commission what semi-automatic firearms do you plan to ban? That's question number one. The second is, you have a proposal, as I have understood it, that every 5 years you have to renew your license, and you won't get a new one if you don't have had a check every 5th year by a doctor that says that you are okay. It sounds like a rather heavy bureaucracy, and doctors will not have the possibility to do other important things. In Sweden, my home country, doctors are obliged to report to the police if a patient, if someone is coming to them and for medical reasons not should have weapons, and they are obliged to report that to the police. It's not every 5th year, it's when you have a guy sitting there in front of you and you can see that he has a license and I don't want him to have that. We think that that is a good rule, but to build up this new bureaucracy every 5th year, what's the meaning of that? That's all for now. But listen to the opinion and don't let us take steps and take actions to fight terrorism that makes ordinary people mad and not law-obeying. Thank you.
Okay, just quickly, we've got another 9 speakers. I'm going to give each maximum 2 minutes to try and speak briefly. I'm going to use the time that we were going to take for the ODR platform and say, can we start the discussion on the ODR no later than 5:45 and have a brief session on the ODR platform, and that may mean that the coordinators meeting this evening will be shortened, and if we don't finish everything on coordinators by 6:30, we'll have to try and see what we can do with Thursday's agenda. Has anybody got any objections? No, thank you. Madam Shanalova.
Děkuji, paní předsedkyně.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also express my thanks to the Commission for presenting this proposal. In my opinion, this proposal brings a lot of things which are very important for security. For example, enhanced cooperation is very good. We should also endorse, for example, better information exchange, traceability of weapons, and so on. I have also received a lot of emails which are relevant. These are emails sent by legal owners, especially from the Czech Republic. We should take into account the fact that each member state has a different type of legislation. Why don't we look at countries with high quality legislation that works? And there are also countries where there are no problems or almost no problems with illegal arms. We should focus our efforts on combating illegal arms. We should focus on the presence of these illegal arms in Europe. But as the Commission said, this proposal was not mentioned to tackle illegal firearms. While our efforts are good, we should not punish legal owners of firearms, because legally owned firearms could be shifted to black market, and that would be against the original idea, and it would present also higher security risks. Let me allow 2 questions. The first is similar to the question of Mr. Dalton. Does the Commission have any statistic regarding the crime committed by legal versus illegal weapons? And my second question, you have mentioned member states and their legislation. I would like to ask, whether this new legislation is compatible to legislation of individual member states, and what is the kind of correlation. Just one last sentence, if you allow me, Madam Chair. What country, in your opinion, is a good example to follow? Thank you.
Mr. Obermeier.
Danke, Frau Vorsitzende. Danke auch der
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Geteilt. Nun, das ist für mich alles ein bisschen verwirrend, da bitte ich um Aufklärung. Heute wurde uns von der Kommission mitgeteilt, es geht nicht um illegalen Waffenhandel. Ja, worum geht es dann eigentlich? Denn heute haben Sie selber Beispiele des illegalen Waffenhandels ja angeführt, den Sie mit Ihren Vorschlägen ja unterbinden wollen. Wenn Sie davon sprechen, dass deaktivierte Waffen wieder eben illegal reaktiviert werden, und dann ist es eben keine legale Sache. Wenn Sie über den Internethandel sprechen, über den illegalen Erwerb über das Internet von automatischen Waffen, ja, darum geht es ja letztlich, Kriegswaffen, automatische A-Waffen, dann ist es eben illegal. Also verwirren mich ein bisschen, und einer der Vorredner hat das ja auch bereits festgestellt. Ich glaube, auch bei allen gut gemeinten Vorschlägen sollten wir nicht das Kind mit dem Bad ausschütten bzw. nichts neu erfinden. Es gibt Staaten in Europa, meine Heimat Österreich hat zum Beispiel ein sehr hohes Schutzniveau. Hier wird registriert, hier wird autorisiert, hier wird regelmäßig kontrolliert und überprüft, sodass wir eigentlich nichts Neues erfinden müssten in Europa, sondern Best Practice als Anhaltspunkt nehmen müssten. Ich habe auch eine Angst vor der Bürokratisierung. Wenn Sie sagen, eine vereinfachte Erklärung für Signalwaffen, das betrifft auch den Segelsport zum Beispiel, dann müssen Sie mir erklären, wie das denn gehen sollte. Wenn Sie eine Registrierung wie bei uns in Österreich bei Jagdwaffen meinen, dann kann ich sie nachvollziehen. Es ist mir auch sehr schwierig zu verstehen, wie Sie die Falschen nicht erwischen wollen. Nämlich, Sie sagen, es sollen die Jäger und die Sportschützen hier nicht betroffen sein. Das müssen Sie mir auch näher erklären. Und letztlich, eines ist auch ganz klar, das Zusammenbauen von Waffen ist nett und schön, aber es wird ein Bruchteil derjenigen sein, diese Waffe auch anwenden. Wenn Sie heute sich ein bisschen informieren, dann wissen Sie, in den Innenstädten Europas bekommen Sie zwischen 500 und 1000 Euro automatische Kriegswaffen im illegalen Untergrund zum Erwerb angeboten. Das heißt also, sind wir sehr vorsichtig, dass wir nicht die Falschen diskriminieren, und einen kleinen Abschluss noch zur Objektivität Ihres Preparity-Komitees. Was ich nicht verstehe, Sie sagen selber, Sie wollen nicht gewisse Gruppen diskriminieren. Ich verstehe nicht, warum Sie bei den Partnern, die in der Vorbesprechung zum Beispiel die Vertretung von 7 Millionen Jägern in Europa nicht eingeladen haben, die FATI zum Beispiel, warum Sie die FESAC, die Sammler Europas nicht eingeladen haben, dafür 9 NGOs, die nicht einmal nachvollziehbar sind, wer sie eigentlich sind und was sie tun.
Thank you. You see, Hallo.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, there are elements in the Commission proposal which seem to be purely ideological, which do not contribute to a better functioning of the internal market or to more security, and which would affect negatively a very large number of European citizens and businesses. I am referring in particular to the proposal to ban certain semi-automatic weapons based on their looks. How do you define whether a semi-automatic firearm resembles too much an automatic firearm? These are the kinds of weapons that are owned and used by tens of thousands of sport shooters all over Europe, and also active reservists in some member states. Licensed, registered semi-automatic rifles are very seldom used for crime in Europe and almost never for terrorist purposes. Nothing indicates they pose a threat to our security. Furthermore, semi-automatic sporting rifles, which resemble assault rifles such as AK-47 or M16, they are specifically designed not to be convertible to automatic action. What is a problem are smuggled fully automatic military firearms, such as those that were used in the Paris attacks. There is much good in the proposal, such as common rules for deactivation, definition for essential components, common markings, sharing of information. I believe there is a general agreement in the Parliament that the rights and freedoms of law-abiding citizens should not be restricted more than is necessary, and that the threat of terrorism should not be used as an excuse for disproportionate knee-jerk reactions. Those will not increase the credibility of the Commission or other European institutions. Thank you.
Adam Schenfield.
Dziękuję Pani Przewodnicząca. Ja jestem przekonany, że jeżeli chodzi o broń,
as regards firearms, which can be potentially dangerous, we need to regulate such firearms, whether they are being used by terrorists or other criminals. But this regulation must be cautious and rational. Otherwise, we can the regulations can be counterproductive. And it seems to me that we are having the situation. We have some negative events, and then we react by coming up with regulations. But very often, such regulations will not have any real effect. And this can apply here, because the restrictive character of these regulations can restrict possibilities in the market. What is the difference between the legal and illegal market? In the legal market, we know the object, the manner, the place of storage, etc., etc. In the illegal market, we cannot answer these questions. And there's one more effect. A closed market and a market where there are bans means that law-abiding citizens can end up in the grey area. And therefore, I would be very cautious as to the scope of the regulations. And I'd like to ask the Commission whether the Commission has performed an evaluation of the results of the regulations. And does the Commission know how many people will be affected by the proposed regulations, and what kind of users, and also what kind of businesses it would affect, and what is the value of the products we're talking about, and also how effective those bans could be, and in what areas, whether it will be economic-wise, social-wise, etc.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As we're discussing today, we all know that use of firearms by criminals and terrorists pose a threat to the security of EU citizens, and as we've recently seen this in the atrocities in Paris. And we've known for some time that there are gaps in the existing proposals from 2008. And I think what is proposed here is trying to address some of those gaps that were identified back in 2008 on marking, traceability and information exchange. It's interesting, therefore, that this debate really does replicate where the gaps are, and I think that my first question goes to the 2008 proposal on Article 4.4, where it states Member States shall, by the 31st of December 2014, ensure the establishment and maintenance of a computerised data filing system, either a centralised system or a decentralised system, which guarantees to authorised authorities access to the data filing systems in which each firearm subject to the directives shall be recorded. My question to the Commission is how many Member States have implemented Article 4.4, and it goes on to say about the filing system should record and maintain for not less than 20 years each firearms type. Of course, we are only as strong as the weakest part of this, and in many Member States we do have stronger, tighter rules which are vitally important, but I think that those Member States that are not implementing things need to be exposed. On the second question I have on the hunting aspects, I have looked at the new proposals and the existing proposals, and I do not see anything affecting Article 12.2 taboo at all. And I think we just have to be clear. There's many concerns that colleagues have on some of this. Maybe one question I certainly have is how many hunters use Kalashnikovs in the European Union? I'd be very interested to know about that. Finally, on blank firing weapons, I think that's very important that that is brought into the scope of this regulation. It was something that was left out in 2008 because of the easy conversion, and we know that for many of us talking to our local police officers that this is an important issue and something that has to be addressed. 2008 we failed to do that. I think this is an opportunity to do something on that today. So I thank you, and I would encourage each member to go and visit their local police offices, talk to local police officials about what is happening on the ground. We each can do that. We've got an opportunity as the Christmas break is coming up to do so. I think as we're discussing and debating this would be a really welcome initiative. Thank you.
Nicola Dante.
Thank you very much. So much has been said already, but I would like to highlight certain issues. What I think is useful in the Commission proposal is the fact that there is a debate on legal weapons. I think it's maybe a little bit forced to link this up to the fight against terrorism, because we have a huge problem with the illegal weapons market. The legal weapons market, I think, is pretty well in check, and I think we should be proud of this. And of course, we need to have stringent weapons to make sure that certain weapons that are extremely dangerous shouldn't be used more and more, because of course this claims lives. I think that there are some very interesting suggestions and proposals here on traceability and the ban on online purchases of weapons and weapon-related ammunition. I think that there's some very interesting points, but it's not going to be easy. It's not easy to regulate on these issues. I think that we need to make a huge effort to look at the issue of both legal weapons and illegal weapons. We want to make sure that we don't have weapons falling into the wrong hands, into the hands of terrorists. I think we should use this effort to achieve harmonization and to take this to other areas as well. Maybe member states could work together more on issues such as intelligence, and other tools that can have an impact on terrorism. I think that we have to keep a watchful eye on the risks involved and on the fact that the rules that we're looking at will have an impact on so many citizens, I'm thinking of hunters and sport shooters. We need the European Commission to lay things down very clearly and to make sure that they are aware of the fact that citizens do have weapons for these reasons. Some are collectors that have historical weapons. I don't think that terrorists use 18th century weapons to carry out their attacks. So we need there to be proper cooperation when it comes to legal weapons, and we also have to at the same time make sure that certain legal activities aren't penalised. Thank you.
Roberta Metsola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to agree with what my colleagues have said. We need definitive rules that have logical aims, and at the same time we should have more control on illegal trafficking of weapons. At the moment there is this market that is illegal in our single market in the European Union. There should be stricter rules on ammunition as well. And as my colleagues have already said, we should try to avoid to misinterpret the rules. and that our citizens, we don't want them to think that this is our reaction to what happened in Paris, because we know that the way criminals work is not going to address criminals. We know how easy it is for these criminals to get their hands on weapons that are not traceable. And then they can easily use them in criminal acts. And at the same time, we should also be careful and be wary of how it will affect sports and sportsmen, self-defense, and also how it will affect military museums. I have received several complaints and emails regarding the fact that there are several concerns on how this proposal will work and how it will affect people who are actually using these weapons as part of their hobbies or as part of a collection. I would also like to agree with join those who asked the Commission who have they contacted before working on this proposal, and have they spoken to representatives of those who will be affected by this proposal?
Ja, Frau Vorsitzende.
Thank you, Madam.
Ja, Frau Vorsitzende, es ist vieles gesagt worden und alles deutet darauf hin, dass es Verunsicherung gibt, dass es scheinbar falsche Betroffenheit gibt. Was Illegalität ist illegal. Und es geht anscheinend darum, dass Legales leicht illegal werden kann oder illegal missbraucht werden kann. Wir haben ja die Verordnung, wir haben die Richtlinie und wir haben den Bericht der Kommission letzter Woche. Ich möchte das gar nicht wiederholen. Meine Bitte für die Versachlichung der Debatte im Ausschuss, denn unseren Zuhörern müssen wir ja sagen, heute beginnt die Debatte im Ausschuss. Sie ist nicht das Ende, sie ist die erste Information. Und die hat schon einiges klargestellt. Aber für die Debatte bräuchte ich von der Kommission Folgendes. Erstens, ich möchte eine Aufstellung haben, was der bestehende Vorschlag für Auswirkungen in den Mitgliedstaaten auf das bestehende Recht in den Mitgliedstaaten hat. Weil wir haben eine unterschiedliche Qualität von Recht in den Mitgliedstaaten. Das Zweite ist, ich hätte gerne gewusst, welche Auswirkungen er auf Jäger, Sportschützen und Sammler hat. Und das Dritte ist, wir müssen wissen, welche Einschränkungen legaler Waffenbesitzer gibt es durch diesen Vorschlag. Denn das sind die drei Hauptbereiche, die uns gegenüber vorgetragen werden. Und ich würde darum ersuchen, das Ausschusssekretariat, dass wir die an die Ausschussmitglieder bisher eingelangten E-Mails schreiben und bedenken, genauestens zusammenfassen und der Kommission vorlegen, damit am Beginn der Debatte eine Antwort der Kommission auf die Eingaben an die Ausschussmitglieder vorliegt und nicht jeder von uns jetzt einzeln antwortet, sondern wir sie kategorisieren und die Kommission eine Antwort gibt, dann hätten wir eine Geschäftsgrundlage für die parlamentarische Arbeit. Danke.
Kaya Kallas.
Thank you. I will not repeat what colleagues have already asked, but I have another question. So we always say here that legislation should be based on studies and analysis, and so we have this report that is based on one-year evaluation study, and in that study no issues were found with the ownership requirements, and only few thought that a weapon categorization is a problem. So following from the seeming discrepancy between the study and the Commission's proposal, I asked the Commission to clarify on whose recommendation the proposal is based on. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a very small observation. Back in 2008, my colleagues looked at the review of this directive, and the final language on that said that the Commission shall, in accordance with the procedure in 13A2, issue common guidelines of deactivation standards and techniques to ensure that deactivated firearms are rendered irreversibly inoperable. And they wrote that in 2008, and in 2015, 7 years later, you finally published the guidelines. So I suspect that my colleagues are going to want to be enormously more clear in whatever they pass going forward to make sure that where they are asking for action, it happens, and that language is really clear. In your initial statement, you announced that it wasn't your intention to ban all semi-automatic weapons because those that were allowed in Category B would still be allowed. But that's not clear to me, reading the proposal in my native tongue. So what does it then mean for others when they're trying to read it? The word resemble, to me, is a very subjective word, and I just wonder whether a lot of the concerns here could be improved by looking closely at what your intentions are and then trying to find some better crafting of the appropriate use of language and making sure that on the deactivated weapons, what is irreversibly inoperable truly is irreversibly inoperable. Thank you very much. So we can do a quick run-up by the Commission, but to be honest, I think we're going to want to have some more discussions and debates on this. So I will also talk to the coordinators about whether or not we want to schedule some separate discussions, maybe a working group on this. Thank you.
I will be short because I know that, of course, time is running. First of all, talking about legal weapons, you have to know that 10,000 people were killed the last 10 years in Europe using legal weapons. So it's a real problem. If you look at some of the terrorist attacks, they were not using illegal weapons, they were using legal weapons. So it's a real problem. We are not talking about something which is completely artificial. First element. Second element, we have made this proposal on the basis of different studies and discussions, with all stakeholders. So it's not something that we have invented, in urgency. That's something which is a result of a long process. It's true that the timing, of course, has been accelerated because of the events that you all know. Third element, for hunters, nothing will change. The text remain exactly the same. And if you look at Annex 1, you will see actually in Annex 1 that the category, which is category C, is not affected at all by our proposal. So nothing will change. For category B, which is used also by hunters but mostly by sport shooters. If you look, for instance, at the number 3 of category B, which is subject to authorization, you can still use, number 4, semi-automatic long firearms, whose magazine and chamber can together hold more than 3 rounds. 3 rounds is 31 bullets. Those kind of weapons are not affected by the Commission proposals. So sport shooters are able to continue to do it. Now, and I come to what the Chair has said, what we prohibit are semi-automatic weapons which resemble an automatic mechanism. It's true that the word resemble is maybe ambiguous, and I agree with you. I mean, you are better English speaking than I am, but so maybe that's something on which, in the process of discussion with the Parliament and the Member States, we can cooperate to try to find a better wording. But let's be clear. What we have in mind are, semi-automatic Kalashnikov, which can be used to kill people. And honestly, if you tell me that sport shooters and hunters are using this kind of weapons, maybe we have a problem and we have a disagreement. We are only talking about those kind of weapons. And again, if I look on the internet, it's very easy to transform those semi-automatic Kalashnikov into automatic weapons very quickly. You find everything on the internet how to do it. So that's clear. This will be affected, but honestly, do we want to accept that hunters and sport shooters use this kind of weapon? It's your choice. On the wording and the clarification, I agree we can try to improve the situation. Maybe very quickly on some of the other points, and I'm not going to raise all those points because it's of course impossible to do it at this stage. Yes, you have systems, we need exchange of information between member states to be improved. Member states are now willing to do so. So they are willing to have more exchange of information between themselves. And maybe the last point on which I would like to say a few words, on deactivations, we want to clarify the situation, and we have done it to some extent through the implementing measures that we have adopted a few weeks ago. I would stop here because I know it's a longer process and many points will have to be raised, but I will stop here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the Secretariat to produce a summary of the issues raised, because there were a great deal, and as a reminder of some of the key messages you've given from the Commission. We will discuss with coordinators what the best way forward is on this file later to make sure that people's views are heard. But as I said at the beginning, as with all dossiers, members will get the ability to give suggestions on how to amend or change this file before it comes to a vote. Thank you very much. On the state of play of the ADR resolution and the online dispute resolution. Thank you, Despina.